Yo, 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 what is going on, CoD Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today we're going to be reacting to Omniarch's 8 Reasons Why I Quit Call of Dragons video. And very similar to the game dying video that Chiz put out, which I now realize I forgot to include this in the video that I put on YouTube, but I'll say this to the same thing, I'll say this to Omni, and this is the same thing I said to Chiz in the live stream, which is that, again, man, Omni's a good friend, someone I know, enjoy the content, and for me, I just very much enjoy reacting to these types of videos just to share a different perspective, right? So hopefully you enjoy as well. Here we go.
I am about to log into Call of Dragons for the first time since the end of July. That's right, it's been over 3 months since I've logged into Call of Dragons. So today I'm gonna go over.
Okay, so first thing for me is that, bear in mind, he said it's been over 3 months, right? This video I think was released on November 18th, and so some of these things, right, so there could be, essentially just be in mind, there could be some things that have changed, right, or have already been addressed for some points he might bring up.
8 reasons why I ultimately decided to sort of just slowly back away from Call of Dragons and quit the game, at least for now, because honestly, even though I haven't been playing the game for the past 3 months, I've been sort of keeping up with its development through community posts and also other YouTubers. The launch of the game, there was a massive amount of hype, and it's really not hard to see why, because Call of Dragons was essentially the spiritual successor to Rise of Kingdoms, which has been arguably the most popular mobile city builder strategy game on the market since it came out in 2018. I guess that depends on if you include Clash of Clans, but
Okay, I mean, first off, Kingdom Builder, let's get it right. I was joking. People can use whatever long form reference they want. Kingdom Builder for me is what I consider the genre to really be, because that really, I think, kind of sums up the majority of the games that are put out within this space. Secondly, he did mention Clash of Clans, but Clash of Clans is more of a city defense game. I don't consider that anything in the realm of Kingdom Builder because it's completely different. And then he did show some trend data. I'm just going to comment briefly on this. We did show trend data as well. We compared Call of Dragons versus Rise of Kingdoms from when Rise of Kingdoms was released, right? Its global release, right? After the rebrand from Rise Civilizations. What we noticed is that it took Rock 2 years to essentially get to above the baseline for where COD released at, right? Which for the graph that we showed over that time, it was like at 52 or 53. On here, I think because he went back to essentially when COD was released, which I want to say it was like mid-March, somewhere around there for 2023. And even on here, you can see that the potential was actually higher on search results for the categories worldwide. However, the dip, and I just want to point out where I feel the dip really is coming in, and again, I'd love to hear what you guys think as well, but a part of this I feel is because of the reset system. And obviously for other reasons as well, but for me, I really feel it was because of the reset system, which is, bear in mind, it's not easily accessible. And the first kingdoms that really were subjected to this were kingdoms 1 through 90, which were the bulk of the biggest group that went from season 1 to 1+, right? There were some other kingdoms mixed in there that had played a season before, but the first big wave of all the new players that were coming, right, within kingdoms 1 through 90, but more specifically 32 through 90, ended up being subjected to the first reset system. And I just want to show this off real quick just to really hammer this point home on why I think this is, whether you want to argue one of the biggest factors or a big factor, is that it's not easily available, right? If I log in, and this is a newer account, right, after, I think it's only at level 7 or 8, is that, is it? Oh no, it's at level 6, shocking. Oh yeah, this was before they did the update. So now you have to get to level 7 so you can get your Augur Stone. Anyways, point is that the information is not easily available. If I want to go and figure out the reset system and see what goes into that, I have to do 1 click here, 2 clicks, 3 click for season, 4 click for season overview, and then 5 actions, essentially just scroll all the way down and see that there's a season reset. This is also not something that they've included in their new season timeline, I believe, from what I can recall. However, I think this would be great to put in there. On top of that, I also think it would be great for once a new player finishes the tutorial, they get a pop-up that basically says, these are the features in our game that are unique or that we would like to highlight, right? Because as a new player, if you can really get people to buy into the game, then that's great. Like if it was me and I was on the dev team, I would say include the resets, include the flying units, include the on-field buildable structures, the timed artifact skills, and the pure ranged units, you know, the mages, the archers, right? And just show, like, even if it's a small animation, right? Even if it's like a 4 or 5 second slide, goes to the next thing, 4 or 5, like make people watch that stuff, because to me, those are the features that you're selling people on. Why would you not introduce that and just have it be a short 20-second clip or something, right? That players get once they complete the tutorial, and everyone has to watch it. It's mandatory, right? That to me would be amazing. Anyways, that's just my thought there. I'd love to know what you guys think about that. If it's right after the tutorial, if it's something else, do you think that would be a good idea? Because personally, I do. I think if you're selling people on the most important or on the most unique or most interesting features of the game, which I like to believe that those are, right? If you're trying to sell it from a new player's perspective on some salesmanship, that's a great way to do it. Okay, moving on. Let's go back.
But I think Clash of Clans is sort of like a different genre. It's more of like a base defense.
Oops, hang on. Let's go to the first red flag.
While we're on the Heroes tab, let's go over the first red flag that I got for Call of Dragons. And this was a red flag that I pointed out in the...
So I just want to point out before he says this, a red flag to me is something that makes me want to stop playing the game, right? This isn't a yellow flag. It's not a purple flag. It's not an orange flag. It's not a white flag. It's a red flag. And a red flag usually indicates I need to get up and walk away, right? Because that's something that is a complete turnoff. So again, just so we're on the same page.
Beta of Call of Dragons on September 16th of 2022. So this was over a year ago at the point of recording this video. There was a beta that was launched. I think it was a regional beta that was only available in select countries. Immediately, the first time that I played Call of Dragons, the first red flag to me was the design of the characters. Okay, and I've been saying this now for over a year, but the design of these characters, look, these characters are not visually appealing to me, and that's my opinion. But
okay, everyone is entitled to their opinion, but let's at least be realistic, right, about this. These are not some 2D pixelated characters like I'm playing Pokemon back in the day, right? You can have artistic and aesthetic differences, but everyone should at least acknowledge that these are modern character designs, regardless of what sub-branch or subcategory they fall into based on the theme of the game. The graphics is good. You cannot deny that the graphics are not good. If it's an aesthetic difference that you have a different view on, that's okay. But we have to at least all acknowledge, like, do I think that the Rise of Kingdoms characters look better than the Call of Dragons characters? No, I don't. Right? It feels like they got too much Botox, a little bit too much lipo, and they probably saw one to too many plastic surgeons. However, do I think that the Rise of Kingdoms graphics for their characters, right, are good now? And did I think they were good back then? Yeah. Because they weren't like just some, 2D, like I'm playing Pong or something, right? The graphics were good. So again, to say that this is a red flag, I just don't agree with, right? I think there's too much stock being put into, because the graphics aren't the way I like it, I'm not going to play the game. However, if the graphics were truly awful, you could sell me on that. Will there be some players that look at the graphics for this and say, I still prefer the graphics to Rock or prefer the graphics to other games? I'm sure there will be. But we should at least be able, as an entirety, holistically, to say, these graphics do not suck. They are good. I just have an indifference to the aesthetics. I'll tell you right now, if there were some other Kingdom Builders that I've played before, that if the graphics were just what I would consider to be actually up just to kind of a standard, even if it was just like hitting par for me, I probably would play those games more, because I felt that some of the games I've played before, the graphics were just like it felt to me that they were being made in like 1950, right, or maybe 1990 or the 2000s, right? It's probably a little bit more relevant of a year. Anyways, let's move on.
Let me just share with you guys. This is my YouTube channel.
Yeah, let's go to the second
dead horse here. Let's move on to the second thing that I realized about Call of Dragons when I first started playing. The second pretty big red flag that I noticed for Call of Dragons was two things. One was that they limited the number of gems that you could gather on the map, and two, you can't send mana to other players. Now, they may have changed these things, but So pause here for a sec. The gem gathering and the sending mana, you can potentially sell me on.
Would I like to see how it looks by removing the limitations on gems, just to see how that plays out over a season or two, right? So that the devs can gather data and assess. Okay. Am I okay with the way it is right now? Yeah, I'm okay with the way it is right now. Same thing for mana. Would I be okay with seeing how that looks on the mana side, where you could send that resource to players? Sure. Why? Because mana is essentially one of the biggest resources that you need for your research. But let's play the little devil's advocate here too as well. To me, some of the reasons why these things aren't being done is because they want to try and put more emphasis on a player running main accounts. One of the other things they've done, which I'm not sure if Omni touched on this, is that they don't allow for you to create more than one character per kingdom, right? So if you want to have multiple characters in one kingdom, you have to have multiple accounts. Account referring to a unique email that is attached to that account. So... right, that's something that's there too, right? That kind of puts more emphasis on, hey, we want you to try and work on one character. We don't want you to have to rely on farms. The two other things I want to mention here is when you talk about RSS sellers, right? So that's something. If you allow for mana to be transferred, that obviously increases the rate of RSS sellers, and this is a very real thing. I can tell you there are RSS sellers that are exclusively and dedicated just to individual kingdoms where they won't sell to anyone else. There's some people that view it as, well, I need an RSS seller to keep up with other people that are using RSS sellers. Regardless of how you view and what your feelings are about RSS selling, it is a very real thing. I know some people that make good money from it, but it's not something that I promote and I advocate for. But I do think it's important to talk about the realisms, right, of what happens in kingdom builders, right? And this is a very real thing. The second part is that when you talk about gem gathering, it's very important to understand that gem gathering is not necessarily a free-to-play thing. Gem gathering is something that free-to-play players can do, but it's not something that free-to-play players can maximize until late game. And I'll give you a few examples on why. Because in order to maximize gem gathering, you need to essentially you need to reduce your outgoing resource stream from your income. So if you can gather, let's just say 50 million resources a day, if you're not max building level, if you're not max research level, you need to constantly keep gathering, right? Because you have to think about, you have 2 buildings that you could potentially upgrade, 2 research queues, so that's 4 outgoing resource streams, plus training troops for your 5 barracks, right? That's 9, plus healing if you need to do that as well, right? So up to 10, but really more 9 as like a hard count. So, and bear in mind with the first 4 probably being a little more prevalent when it comes to building and research. However, once you hit max building level and you hit max art research level, now you've reduced 4 of those outgoing resource streams. So now you only have, really for the most part, 5, right? And then potentially up to 6, which would be training troops and healing, right? That's the bulk of it. And so it's a lot easier for someone to sell gathering gems when you don't need to gather resources anymore. And because, again, you need your 5 legions, or you're up to 5 legions to go out there and gather, right? And, again, if you're trying to max it out, you would gather with 5 legions for gems. Now, if you're talking about, and bear in mind, spenders can do this faster because they can basically reach max level a lot faster, reducing their resource streams for buildings and research. So then they could start focusing their legions on gathering gems sooner if they wanted to. The other side of looking at this is that if you use farm accounts, if you could arguably on your main only gather gems, and then on your farms, build them up enough to where you're sending resources to your main to supplement. That's one way that some people do it, right? This is something that's done in Rock. I'm sure maybe some people are doing it in CoD, and that could be a little bit more focused. So I just don't know if that's something that the developers necessarily want. Like I said, I'm okay with the way that things are right now. Would I, however, like to maybe see how those things could play out over a season or two, even if it's just them gathering enough data, or if it's them saying, hey, look, we gathered all this data from Rock, and this is why we want to be different. The biggest thing here is providing an explanation and justifying your reasonings for doing what you're doing, right? And I think that, I don't know if they've necessarily come out and have said that publicly or as great a detail. Moving on.
I suspect that they haven't, and these two things for me were massive red flags. Now, here's the thing. In Rise of Kingdoms, did I gather gems? No. In Rise of Kingdoms, did I send a lot of gold to other players, which is that game's equivalent to mana? The answer is no. I think there's been some times where I've received gold during KVK and things like that, but these two limitations effectively make it really hard for free-to-play players to grind in a way that would make meaningful progress in the game. Now, here's the thing. If you look at Rise of Kingdoms, right?
Okay, so like just to be clear here, right? These are not things that dampen your ability to grind in the game, right? I am a very low spender, right? And bear in mind, I played Rock for years as a free to play, and I had only spent $20 in the game, and that was after 2 years of playing. I never once felt that, and bear in mind, I never gathered gems in Rock. Always gathered gold, never felt that I needed those resources to be transferred to me. And I don't even know if I ever even received transfers of gold. Maybe, right? It's just been so long I can't really recall. In CoD, I don't really have a mana problem, right? If you're out there gathering nonstop and you're grinding that out, you should not have a problem with mana. Maybe if you're trying to eventually do 2 mana researches or 2 researches at the same time that cost high level mana, once you start getting to like the mid late game tech, you could maybe sell me on that where you might have some delays. But to say that it's hard dampening or it's hurting in a meaningful way the progression grind for free to play, I don't believe that. However, if you have a different opinion, I'd love to hear down below. And bear in mind, I'm talking about the ideal situation where you're able to like gather close to nonstop, if not nonstop, right? And I'm not saying over like sleeping time, obviously aside, right? I imagine you would send your gatherers out before you go to sleep, and then when you log back in the morning, right, you're gathering again. So, right, kind of comparing it in its ideal sense. Now, on the gem gathering side, I don't think that that's hurting anyone's progression because it is what it is, right? They've always been very transparent and clear about that from the beginning. However, if they had changed things and they nerfed it, that I think would be a different conversation.
Right. I am going to use a 12-inch PvP as an example. Is it competitive? He doesn't take this the wrong way, but I mean, you put 12-inch PvP on the battle, in the blink of an eye, it's over. And take 12-inch as the most from farms to your main, you still end up with an account that is, first of all, quite good and removes the chaining, and it removes effectively the gem grinding and gem farming, and it removes the ability to have tons of farm accounts and make meaningful progression. It feels like out of the box, the developers wanted to sort of suffocate the free-to-play players. Now, look, is gathering gems fun? No. Do I recommend players do it? Not really. Do I recommend players have 9 farm accounts in Rise of Kingdoms? I mean, if you want, but it's not that fun of an experience, but you can still do it if you want to. And Call of Dragons, out of the box, made their intentions clear, right? Even though all these things are not fun, and even though these things aren't things that I do, the intention was clear. They seemingly wanted to make it harder to be a free-to-play player, and to me, that's just a red flag. It's just a red flag. If people want to grind the game for 24 hours, let them grind the game for 24 hours, as long as it doesn't ruin the experience for everyone else. Which, I mean, look at 12-inch PvP.
So, and I think there's kind of 2 different things here, right? Do I view the gem gathering and the inability to transfer mana to another player, do I view the limitation on gem gathering for an individual and/or the non-existence, I guess, or just the inability to transfer mana to another player as what I would label as a red flag for the reasons on why I should immediately quit the game? No, not at all. However, I do agree, because this is something I've stated as well, which is that, yeah, these types of games should allow for you to play for up to 16 hours or 24 hours straight, where there's enough events, there's enough things to do, where as a free-to-play, you can progress your account in a meaningful way. 100% agree with that. I wish more kingdom builders did this. I think they would be a lot more successful. Because bear in mind, spending is a way to advance, not a way that should always be viewed as staying ahead, right? Or always being stronger, right? And I'm using that in kind of loose senses, right? Where if a free-to-play player eventually was able to hit max level, right, where they were getting max VIP, they were max buildings, they were max research, they're already T5, right? I would like to believe that they should eventually be able, and they had like a couple max artifacts, right? They should be able to some degree to keep up with, if not potentially beat, right? People that are high spenders, because the spending isn't something that should be done in a way where it's giving you an infinite advantage over everyone else, right? It's a means to advance and progress quicker in the game so you can get to late game content sooner. And sometimes I feel like that's a common misconception. But yeah, like I said, I agree on this point. I think it's a great one. Let's get to the next flag.
The third red flag that I had with Call of Dragons was that I noticed they sort of had an emphasis on hero specific tokens and also season specific tokens. And if you guys don't know, tokens are effectively the legendary commander sculpture in Rise of Kingdoms. Okay, in this game they're called tokens, and it felt like to me, and I mean, I say feel like, but I mean, you could just see for yourself when you play the game, that a lot of the rewards in the game came in the form of season 1, here it's G1, I don't know why they call it G, but season 1 and season 2 tokens. Okay, now I have a lot of universals here, and that's because I bought a lot of the bundles and I haven't used any of them, right? I noticed that a lot of the rewards came in the form of season specific tokens or in hero specific tokens. And the problem for me with this strategy or with this reward structure is it makes it harder for players to sort of future proof their account by saving up truly universal tokens for whatever's coming later. And that's one of the beautiful things about Rise of Kingdoms, is that there isn't.
So I just want to point out, this is something that actually has been addressed already by the developers, and they are going to be coming out with some type of an exchange or recycle system for the I want to say, I guess surplus would probably be an okay word, right? The extra hero specific tokens. And we're not sure if this is going to apply to the universal tokens for seasons, but we know at least for the hero specific tokens, this is something that's already being addressed. Let's move on.
Really your account. The fourth red flag for me was the skill upgrade system. Now, in Rise of Kingdoms, when you add,
and I ran through that one fast, but I will say that I do generally agree that to just have like this surplus of tokens, very similar to how in Rock, right, there's like this big thing where people have like a surplus of VIP. Yeah, do I think there should be some ways to exchange those, like any type of surplus material, whether you're converting it, if you're getting a weighted number that's applied to it, and then there's like a universal store you can go buy stuff, 100%. Right, it's one of the reasons why they started doing, like in Rock, I think they had eventually came out with being able to switch speed ups, right? So you could switch building speed ups to research, or research to building, and I think healing was mixed in there, and I don't know if universal speed ups were there, but I know that was something that had I don't want to say recently came out, but eventually had came out for one of those exact reasons.
Add a skill to a commander, it goes on one of the skills that you have unlocked, and that is a randomized system that basically everybody agrees kind of sucks for the player experience, right? Like if you don't know what you're doing, then you could potentially end up getting a bunch of skill points in a skill that's not as good as the active skill, for example. Now, there are ways to undo your progress on that commander so you can have a chance again at sort of re-rolling, but that system sucks. I'm just gonna say it, the system sucks. Okay, and in Grand Cross Age of Titans, which is another city builder game just like Call of Dragons,
Kingdom Builder,
they just let you pick the skills that you want to level up. And like, imagine if you played World of Warcraft and you just didn't get to choose what skills got stronger.
Okay, so very similar to the third point there. Do I think that an excess of, and I didn't mention this, but do I feel like an excess of surplus or a surplus of hero tokens and just having those there is a reason to just flat out quit the game and is a red flag? No, not at all. Do I think it's a little bit of an inconvenience that a community can advocate for? Yeah, sure. I could label that as an inconvenience, but to say that's a red flag where it's like, oh my God, because I've already maxed out my hero and now I have a surplus of these resources, I'm going to quit the game. That's not a red flag. That's an inconvenience. Right, just to be clear. On number 4 here is talking about the exchange, is how you're leveling up. Bear in mind, I don't know if he mentions this here. I don't think so. But you can level your first skill. Get to your level 10, star up your hero, and then unlock the second skill and level that up. You can technically level skills up in order. However, Do I like the idea of being able to freely choose what skills you level up in any order you want? 100%. I think that's a great idea. Do I think that that is a red flag for me needing to quit the game because I cannot level or I cannot skill upgrade my heroes freely, when for a very long time that's how it was in Rock, right before they came out with the skill lock system? So do I think that that's a red flag? No. Do I think it's an inconvenience? Yes.
Over time, like you're playing as a fire mage and you want to make sure it came out this year, and despite them knowing players don't like the randomized system from Rise of Kingdoms, advocate here, okay? Because
I just want to point out as well that for someone who routinely monitors the suggestions board on COD Discord, along with being in many of the top alliance discords in the game, right? I very much, and bear in mind for those who may not know, right? I have 291 accounts out of 291 kingdoms, I believe, unless they had released one recently. And I'll just show this for some context here. Excuse me. Right. So, and I think I don't know how often I showed it or not, but so, right. So I have an account in every single kingdom. Right, and I regularly, just so, right, for those who might be watching this video for the first time, I routinely pull data on a lot of these kingdoms, and I view a lot of these kingdoms as well. Right, and I like to believe that I probably have a little bit wider of an ear spread out through the community, right, than probably anyone else. And that's just because I very much proactively like to engage with the community on a lot of different issues and topics and mediums and facets. So, and again, that's not to say that anyone else is, I'm not like saying, oh, I'm better, I know more than everyone else. Not at all. It's only to just give some context here on the part of mention, which is that there has never been some high level of overwhelming feedback and support excuse me, that has the community in an uproar. That's like, oh my God, we need to add this in because we absolutely hate the random skill system. I'm not saying that people don't like it. I'm saying that there has not been some type of organized effort or hordes of people, hundreds, let alone thousands of people, that have put forth a suggestion or have given overwhelming feedback that says, yeah, we need this to change. Now, could that happen? Could we organize that? 100% we could do that. And maybe we will. But to say that this is what, again, a red flag that is basically stopping you from playing the game. I mean, to be fair, why didn't you stop playing the game when it came out? If this was a red flag to you then, it would obviously still be a red flag to you now, right? Why would you keep playing the game at that point if it's a red flag to you? Red flags are things that are supposed to deter you away from playing a game, not keep your activity up. Again, that's my view on a red flag. I don't know how other people view red flags. It's like, again, maybe you guys got orange and yellow flags and you're thinking they're red. Again, that's my opinion on it. Let's move on.
As I understand from the development, definitely a miss. Okay, those first four things are all red flags. And I think that a lot of players, I would say a majority of players, would agree with those four things. I think like just out of the gate, those are all just sort of just unappealing things about the game. The next four things are going to be...
So I just want to point out, right, unappealing is not the same as unplayable. Red flag to me is unplayable, right? Like, oh, I played the game, I saw this is a red flag to me, I'm not going to play anymore. I don't know anyone who views, and I should be clear here with the words. I do not know a lot of people that would say something's a red flag, but then keep playing the game despite that red flag. Like, are you trying to look for enough green flags to offset the red flag ratio? I just, again, that's how I'm realistically looking at it. I'd love to know what you guys think, right? Again, am I off on that one? Right, is it a little bit too harsh to say? But again, that's just how I feel on it. Let's go.
My opinion. Okay, these are strictly my own opinion. You can agree or disagree in the comment section below, and in fact I would really like to know what you think about these things. Okay,
well, I'm giving you my thoughts in video form, Omni.
Rise of Kingdoms is actually more casual friendly than Call of Dragons. Think about how you wage war in Rise of Kingdoms. You send out an army and you face smash it into a PvE content, a player, or whatever. That's it. You're done. Okay, 99% of the combat in Rise of Kingdoms is melee combat, and that's it. extremely simple combat. In Call of Dragons, you have flying units, you have ranged combat. Not only that, but you have medium ranged combat with the archers, and you have long ranged combat with the mages, and you also have artifacts which you have to manually cast on, sometimes in a direction. Like a lot of the artifacts are skill shots, like as if this were League of Legends or something like that, which it's not. And for me, as a player in this genre, I think that the combat in Call of Dragons is amazing. Like they took what worked in Rise of Kingdoms and they made it better, and that's great. But my literal job is to play games like this, and so that's fine for me. But when you're talking about some, you know, again, to use my demographics as an example, a 36-year-old guy is just sitting on the bus on his way to work. He sees an ad for Call of Dragons, he downloads it. What is the probability that he's going to find the combat system in Call of Dragons more complicated than Rise of Kingdoms? 100%. And so as the complication of the combat system goes up, the amount of players willing to learn it, understand it, and enjoy it goes down. That's just how it works. Okay, so whether you like the combat or not is kind of irrelevant. What matters most is which combat system is most enjoyed by the most number of people. And I, again, with Rise of Kingdoms, I think
an easy way to describe this is basically like a hack and slash game versus something that requires more actions, right? Like you could compare like a hack and slash versus something like WoW, right? And I'm generalizing in this sense. Or you could compare I don't want to say a 2D, but like a 2 or 3 step strategy game versus something that takes 7 or 8 steps, right? Yeah, I think this is a solid point when it comes to the generalization of if you're playing a game that requires more actions, more steps, a little bit more learning, the learning curve and the entry level can be higher. How high? I think that depends. However, to try and say that Call of Dragons is, you know, a brand new, higher level, harder learning experience, I think that's a reach. Right? Do I think that's something that some players could be turned off to if they're coming from Rock? Sure. Okay, I could see that argument being made. This is a little bit iffy for me on a red flag, because if you're really again, I've played Rock for a while, so if you play Rock, you understand the way you're sending your marches out is the same, the free troop movement is the same. You having to go and move your unit over to this other unit to go and attack them, the path that they have to take, that's the same. The only difference is that you have ranged units and flying units, right? So the ranged units can just attack at range, but that's not something that you have to do. If anything, they attack earlier, right? So that's actually more efficient because they don't have to go all the way to the unit to basically smash their face or to mosh pit. The second one is the Celestials, which is the same thing. The only new interaction you get with them is you can just fly over terrain. I don't think that's a complicated thing to learn. I think that's actually pretty simple. However, you could make an argument for things like building on-field structures. That's new, right? So that's like an additional action step you'd have to do outside of what the average person who plays Rock would do. Same thing with activating an artifact skill, right? That's something. And again, bear in mind, I'm saying from like when I played. I'm not sure if they've had it in some type of active skills that you can use now on commanders in Rock, but I would say that would be a difference, right? Where you now can use an active artifact skill where you attach those and then you can hit them. And obviously now with the inclusion of war pets, that's another thing you'd have to do too as well, but it's not really something that you actually have to do. There's no clickable action for that, and it's just attaching it very similar to like equipment, right? That's kind of what you would consider a war pet to be more relatable to in Rock. So if you're looking at the combat at face value, and then on top of that, you're not rallying buildings or flags or fortresses. You're destroying them just by going up and basically attacking them like you would a unit, and then the units circle around the flag or the building, and then they just basically bang their hammers to destroy it, right? So, I mean, you can make an argument there's three core differences. However, do I think those differences are incredibly complicated to understand? No, not at all, right? I think even a new player could easily grasp, oh, well, my unit can attack from range. Oh, my unit can fly over terrain. Like, I mean, that is not a difficult thing to understand. So do I think that this is a red flag when it comes to like having a few more options and things to do based on like the core differences between Rock and CoD? I don't know if I would categorize this as a red flag. I'm iffy on this one. I understand where Omni's coming from, and I do agree that there's some people that can view it this way. I just don't know if I view this as like, oh my God, because that's in the game, I'm now going to walk away from it. like that level of red flag is very hard for me to take that and say, like, oh my God, that is a big turnoff to a majority of people. How dare they allow for me to attack from ranged? How dare they make me have to move my unit and watch it fly over terrain? How dare they make me not be able to rally this flag to burn it? I now have to go walk my troop up and hang out on the out. Like that, those just don't seem as though they're complicated steps to me. But again, I do understand in part, right, for where some people can be coming from as a general turnoff when you're comparing a PvP system or a playing system that you're used to, and then coming and trying something else. It just may not be everyone's cup of tea. That I can wrap my head around.
One of the reasons. Game. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about, and this is again my opinion, is that I didn't really feel attached to the community of Call of Dragons, and this is actually something that I know Chiskel Gaming has talked about a bunch on his channel or in his sort of videos where he goes over the future of Call of Dragons and, you know, how he feels about it or whatever. And I think he's hit the nail on the head there. I think that, you know, when I first joined Call of Dragons, and let me just be clear, like, I came in as a content creator, so I had a little bit of a different experience than a lot of people, right? It felt like Call of Dragons was filled with just the grindiest, sweatiest Rise of Kingdoms players out of the gate, and of course it would be, right? Like, that's going to be the core audience. I mean,
just because Nefesto's here, that don't mean nothing.
Like, the most important part about the game was grinding rather than just like having fun. And like, again, maybe Omniarch's just being casual for this video. Like, maybe I'm just a casual Andy. Maybe I'm a casual game enjoyer. Okay. But the cool part about Rise of Kingdoms is that you can kind of play it casually most of the time. And then when KVK comes around, you go hard. Okay. That's the cool part. But in Call of Dragons, like, from launch, it felt very grindy, and I just didn't really feel like there was much of a community there. It felt like everyone was just trying to, I mean, like, look, it's a war game, right? So of course everyone is just going to try to dominate the server as soon as things happen, and I totally get that, but the community kind of felt temporary to me. Like, we knew that season resets were going to happen eventually, right? And so I don't know, I just don't feel like I really connected with players in this game like I did in Rise of Kingdoms when I first started playing Rise of Kingdoms. And there's something about community that is really a vibe check, and that's one of the things that makes it really difficult to talk about, at least for me in this video, from like my experience. Maybe it was like my starting server, maybe I just got like a bad starting server, or whatever the case might be. I don't know, but I think that, you know, because Chiskel has talked about this so much, I feel like I'm not alone in this, but the vibe check was just missing. It just missed the vibe check for me. It just didn't feel like a very community oriented game, and that's a big component of Rise of Kingdoms. Okay, this is also
okay. So this one, I more or less almost holistically or wholly agree with Omni. This is something that we've been talking about since the beginning. Obviously, Chiskel talked about this and a few other creators as well. Let me try not to die. Thank you. Which, and I want to point out, I really wish Omni gave examples here. I think when you speak on things and you're so broad and vague, as he was when he talked about, you know, the game felt super grindy, I just really would have liked for him to explain that, because again, this is a new point that he's making. I would have liked for him to give a couple examples or references on what he meant by saying that the game was too grindy, first and foremost. Secondly, when he talks about community, 100% correct there. And I wish he would have spoken about this too as well. The biggest reason why there is a loss of sense of community for when you're talking about a broader and larger community is because the game is more alliance focused. You don't have home kingdoms. You don't have king tools. You don't really have, for the most part, home kingdom discords. I mean, some kingdoms do, but it's not as kingdom community in a broad sense for everyone that is in your kingdom, even though you are assigned a home kingdom, as you get in Rock. And that is the biggest reason why. On top of, obviously, with the resets, that had played a smaller factor in as well prior to them fixing that and now allowing for your players. Because before, when you reset, all the players would get kicked out of the alliance, but you could still keep the name of the tag. It would restart at a lower player capacity going into a new season, and you'd have to wait for that main alliance to gain increased player capacity for the players that were auto kicked out to then rejoin, to get everyone back to rejoin, right? And that was just, and I agree, that was a big turnoff. I like some of the other reset features, But that was probably the biggest one that when it factors into something like community. And obviously they've changed that now to where now going into a new season, you keep everyone that's in your alliance. But if they leave and you're under the max cap for where your alliance is, then they have to either wait to rejoin until that max cap increases, right? So you'd be, if you came in 215 over 200 and someone left, you couldn't rejoin until it became 214 over 215 or over 220 as a brief example. But that's really the big reason on why there's such a loss of community, is because there's more of a general alliance focus and not a general kingdom focus. And on average, alliances are having between 100 and 200 or 160 to 200 players in them, right? That's not really going to build, it will build you a community, but not as big as what most of the Rock players are used to in their kingdoms, because of the way that the game focuses more on home kingdoms rather than alliance focused.
So one of my opinions, it's too time consuming to keep up with multiple city builder games. That's just the fact. It's just a fact. These games, they can be very grindy, like we just talked about, right? And that's okay. I can appreciate a grindy game, but they really do compete for each other's time. And so when you build and
I just want to point out the community thing that he brought up, I view that as a real red flag. That to me is the realest red flag that I've heard him mention, for my view, thus far, right? And that is something that I'm glad they listened and they made some adjustments there. I do think there's still some improvements, but I think that aspect is going in the right direction.
predecessor to a successful city builder, you really are kind of fighting uphill with getting that audience to convert over, right? Like if you were playing Rise of Kingdoms and then Call of Dragons comes out, there is first of all an opportunity cost and a sunk cost, right? Because you already have so much progress in Rise of Kingdoms that switching to a new...
So I think this is a little bit smaller. I don't consider this to be a red flag generally when we're talking for like the universal average player. For Omni, I'm sure it can be, right? If you're a content creator and you're having to, and you're already invested in Rock and you're trying to get into something else and, you know, again, you just don't feel it, I can understand for him on why that'd be a red flag. And I want to point out that a lot of what I'm commenting on the red flag is more kind of universal across the entire game. These are personal reasons. Well, sorry, I should say this one is a personal reason, right? Because he specifically mentions it, that it's a personal reason. So for this, I don't really know why this was included. I wouldn't have said that this is like a red flag. I don't know if he says it's a red flag. Let me see here. He says, oh no, he did actually change it. So you can see here, he had 4 red flags, and then the 5th reason was combat, 6th reason. I don't know if he said this was a red flag. I think this is just more of a personal reason for him. So I'm happy that that was addressed differently.
New game where you're starting over, like you feel like you're...
Let's go to the next one.
And the final thing that I want to go over here, and again, this is my opinion, and this was the nail in the coffin for me, and that is season resets. We knew going into the game that season resets were a thing, but once it came around, it kind of just took all the wind out of my sails. It's one thing to have a game that's really grindy, and it's another thing to make me grind the same stuff again. Like, ooh, that feels really bad. That feels really bad. Like the fact that look at the levels of my heroes. Like I leveled all of them up, and like I have to level them up again. Like, oh, nope, no, I'm not gonna do it. I'm just not gonna do it. And that's the thing where it's like, you know, it feels kind of worse than Crystal Tech in Rise of Kingdoms because it resets everything, and also your policies reset as well. And it's like, oh my god, bro. Like, I'm going to use World of Warcraft as another example, okay? Imagine you hit level 60 and then you just go back to level 1 and you just lose all your skills.
So I want to put it, I think a more appropriate example here would have been using like the Call of Duty prestige system where, right, you hit, I think that's what it was called, right? Where you would hit max level and then you could prestige and you would gain a star or something that says, hey, you've done like one full run of getting to max level and now you do another full run. And you could like re-prestige yourself multiple times to where you could get like this max rank, which basically would have been you hitting max level if it was 50, 60, whatever the number was. Like you could have done that 10 times in a row or something like that, or 10 times over, however, like a lot. I think that would have been a little bit more, like I get where he's coming from on this, but I just want to say I like that reference just a little bit more than the WoW, because I think that's a little bit more related to having a consistent or a constant reset here. However, I want to point out that I do agree with him on this one. This is and can be viewed as a real red flag, right? Even though, yes, they were transparent about it up front, they did tell, that's what it was, but it also leads into one of the things I talked about earlier, which is that it's difficult to find that information out. So yes, even though they were transparent about it, it doesn't mean that every single new player is aware of it until it happens. And that was very clear after we started seeing the first big groups of kingdoms go into their reset. For those of you that have been with the CoD community for a while, you know that on the Discord, after that first initial wave of like 27 through 90 ended up getting into their first resets, and really for the most part 1 through 90, right? That's where you started getting the first taste of complaints, of feedback, and really just kind of more let's not have as many resets, right? Or no resets at all. And I want to point out, generally speaking, if CoD had absolutely no resets in it at all, but it still had its core unique features, I would still play CoD over Rock, just without any choice and without any doubt in my mind, because CoD to me is a more competitive kingdom builder. And it's a kingdom builder that I wish Rock had these features in it. And so for me, I probably won't play another kingdom builder until, honestly, you have true ranged PvP. Like, that is attractive. The fact that archers and ranged units do not actually attack at a real range, like, that to me is... regardless if you want to say it's a turnoff or not, it just doesn't make sense to me. I get why that is the way it is in Rise of Kingdoms, because it's been that way forever, and maybe because they didn't have the technology or they weren't able to do something like that, or maybe they just didn't think of doing it at that time, or maybe they didn't want to do it at that time, whatever the reason. But for someone who loves kingdom builders, and I love the kind of competitive, almost like esports aspect to it, when you have this, and it's now like you've almost found this way to like merge RTS and traditional strategy games into a kingdom builder. Oh man, this is like the hybrid. This is like the David. What did they say? This was like the Brad Pitt, like David Beckham baby or something like that. Like whatever someone said once upon a time. I mean, it's great, right, for the people that enjoyed that, and that's something that I enjoy. But anyways, overall, I want to say I do agree with the resets, and like I said, I think out of everything that he said, I think there's like 2 what I would consider to be more realistic red flags that Omni mentioned. But again, those are my thoughts. Obviously, I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments down below, right? Again, do you agree with all the points that Omni said? Are there some where you're a little iffy with? Do you have a different opinion and a different viewpoint, as I have, sharing you my thoughts throughout the video? But again, right, love Omni. You know, I only wish him well in Rock, and hopefully, right, when some of these things do change and or if more changes come their way, maybe we'll be able to see him back. And yeah, man, dude, loving the hairdo, man. Only if I could be fresh all day, every day, day. With that in mind, that's going to do it for me. As always, until next time, we will catch you later.